mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, October 20th. This is Africa 54.
Chad protests over the junta's civilian handover delay turned deadly again. Ghana's currency crash continues, with traders locking up to protest the government's handling of the economy.
We'll have those stories in a moment, but first we have a developing story out of London. British Prime Minister Liz Truss abruptly resigned on Thursday. Her leadership was doomed by her economic program that sent shockwaves through the markets and divided her Conservative Party just 6 weeks after she was appointed. Speaking outside of her 10 Downing Street office and residence, Truss accepted that she could not deliver the promises she made when she was running for Conservative leader, having lost the faith of her party.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
For more on this stunning revelation, VOA reporter Venus and Shimi Imana joins me live from London with more details. Good evening, Venus.
Hello, good evening.
Fill us in on the latest from London.
The latest we know is that the race in the context is open now. I've got at least 2 people who are running for the premiership. We know that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who is traveling from the Caribbean where he was on holiday, will be in the race. We also know that Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor and the unsuccessful candidate, is also running. We also know that Kant, who is the new Chancellor, is not running, but we might have other contests like Ben Wallace, the Defense Minister. That's a development story. That's what we know now. But also we have the opposition leaders like Keir Starmer, who are calling for a general election rather than having the next Prime Minister being named, appointed by MPs.
Venus, this has come as a shock. It's really breaking news. Nobody probably expected this to happen this soon. What's the reaction of the British people on the ground?
The British people, of course, were shocked, but they were expecting her to go because, as she said rightly, she failed to deliver on the mandate she was elected for by the Conservative Party. The anger among British people is high. There have been a lot of strikes since when she came to power 44 days ago. Winter is coming and the energy prices are still going high. The mortgage rate is high. So it is not only the financial turmoil, the financial market that brought her down. It is also the anger of the British people who on the street of London, they want a general election now because they don't want a prime minister who will be elected by MPs. They say it is time now to change and to move on with a government that brings unity and stability in the country.
Venust, thank you for your reporting. Venust Shimiyimana reporting for us live from London. Now to Africa, where security forces in Chad fired tear gas Thursday to disperse protesters during violent clashes in N'Djamena. The chief doctor at Union Chagou Hospital says multiple people have died from gunshot wounds. VOA's Paul Ndiho has more.
Anti-government protesters ransacked and torched the party headquarters of Chad's newly appointed Prime Minister, Saleh Kezbo, on Thursday as security forces broke up demonstrations calling for a quick transition to the democratic rule. The military-run Central African nation has been on the edge since the sudden death in April 2021 of President Idriss Déby, who ruled for 3 decades. Déby was visiting troops who were fighting rebels when he was killed. Images posted on social media Thursday showed debris and a vehicle on fire in the Chadian capital, N'Djamena. Prominent Chadian opposition leader Success Masra, the head of the Transformers Party, said, quote, "They are shooting at us. They are killing our people, soldiers of the only general who refused to honor his word. And today marks the end of the 18-month transition. This is how he intends to set up a dynasty by killing the nation." People stood around bodies covered by Chadian flags, and the wounded received treatment at a Union hospital in the capital. Hospital sources said at least 5 people have died. There has been resistance to a transitional military council headed by Déby's son, who took power after his father died and pushed elections back to October 2024. Pro-democracy protests in Chad have spread to other cities on Thursday. A video posted on social media showed crowds of protesters, many on motorbikes, waving flags and carrying banners and tree branches. Posts on social media claim protesters heading towards government building were repelled by the military. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
For more perspective on Chad's politics, I'm joined by Timothy Donanmaye, VOA French to Africa. Chief Tim, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you.
It's only been barely a week since the formation of a new government of national unity, but Chadians are still very, very angry. What is behind this anger?
Esther, what is behind this anger is that, first of all, people, the opposition groups and civil society groups were not happy with the national dialogue. They said it was not inclusive. And the second issue is that the national dialogue led to another transition, 24-month transition, instead of a civilian-led government. So these are the 2 reasons that people are very upset about and are demonstrating about.
So again, we're seeing more political unrest in the Sahel region, Chad included. There's also a very vocal opposition to the French presence in that region. Why is there such a strong anti-sentiment against the French military forces in the Sahel?
The anti-French sentiment was born out of the perceived support of French government to long-time leaders in the Sahel, in the Francophone regions. And in the case of Chad, President Macron of France was one of the first Western leaders to come out and endorse General Mahamat Idriss Déby as a transitional president. So these are the reasons why people in the Sahel region feel that France is hindering the development, the promotion of democracy in Francophone countries.
Do we know why the demonstrators today targeted the Prime Minister's office and torched it? What was the reason behind this?
Well, Prime Minister Saleh Kezbo has been a long-time opposition leader in Chad, but then he chose to join the transitional government that was set up in 2021, and he had 2 ministers in that government. Then he was the vice chair of the committee that led the national dialogue, and now as a prime minister, so people feel that he's been rewarded for what he did to advance the cause of General Mahamat Idriss Déby. You know, that's why people ransacked his office and the headquarters of his party.
Oh, Tim, so much happening in Chad lately. Thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure.
Timothy Donangmaye is VOA French to Africa chief. Ghana is regrouping financially on Thursday after it said the currencies leaped further against the US dollar on Wednesday, prompting traders to lock up their shops in Accra to protest the economic situation. David Doyle has more.
The usually bustling streets of Accra's central business district were quiet this week as Ghanaians shut up shop in a protest over economic conditions. On Wednesday, the Cedi currency plunged to a new low of 12.3 to the dollar. Stationery shop owner Francis Finn says the worsening exchange rate means he can't afford to buy books and paper from his suppliers.
The dollar is increasing all the time. Day in, day out, the dollar is going up now. When you go to Harbour, you want to throw your things, it's too much for us, my brother. We can't. So, we decided to go to the shop.
Finn is a member of the Ghana Union of Traders Association. It has called for all its members to suspend activities from Wednesday to Monday in protest. Bookseller Alfred Kabino Otsiwa is not a member of the union. He said his business is suffering, but that a strike won't put food on the table.
But if you close shop till Monday, when you open shop on Monday, the government is not going to reduce the rate of the dollar. It will probably increase. It might go to 14 or 15 cities by Monday. Who loses?
Inflation is surging in the West African country, despite repeated rate hikes by the central bank. The government is in the process of negotiating a support package with the International Monetary Fund. But for some merchants, help is not coming quickly enough.
That was David Doe of Reuters reporting. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says there's a small window to prevent genocide in his home region of Tigray in northern Ethiopia. In his sharpest comments on the war yet, Tedros told reporters in Geneva that food and healthcare are being used as weapons of war in Tigray, which is largely cut off from the outside world.
Banking, fuel, food, electricity, and healthcare are being used as weapons of war. Media also is not allowed, and every distraction of the civilians is done in darkness. Even people who have money are starving because they can't access their bank for 2 years. Children are dying every day from malnutrition. There are no services for tuberculosis, HIV, diabetes, hypertension, and more. Those diseases which are treatable elsewhere are now a death sentence in Tigray. This is a health crisis for 6 million people, and the world is not paying enough attention. I urge the international community and the media to give this crisis the attention it deserves. There is a very narrow window now to prevent genocide.
The Ethiopian government did not immediately respond to requests for comment. For more insight on the Ethiopia-Tigray conflict, I'm joined live via Skype from Oxford University by Jason Mosley, a research associate at the African Studies Center. Jason, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks very much.
Jason, this has gone on for quite some time, since 2020, and it continues. Is the international community getting involved enough to stop the Ethiopian conflict?
So the short answer is no, they are not. The international community is engaged, but they face a real challenge in that the stakeholders in the conflict are not particularly tractable to external influence. The Ethiopian government, the Tigrayan leadership, and the Eritrean government have all proved over the years quite resistant to external influence. So with all of the main components of the conflict seemingly committed to a battlefield victory rather than a negotiated outcome, it's very difficult to see how the international community can engage with that and produce a productive outcome. But certainly more attention should be paid.
Jason, even as the peace talks draw close, we are still seeing Ethiopian government troops capturing key cities in the northern part of Tigray, and airstrikes as well that are killing even civilians. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so this just goes to this point that the last several weeks have seen a resumption of fighting after somewhat of a lull over the last few months, in an intense conflict that's affecting millions of people in Tigray and hundreds of thousands or potentially millions around the edges of the Tigray region in Ethiopia. And over the last several months, there have been stop-start progress towards some kind of engagement. The United States has tried to get a series of talks going. The African Union has had a platform that has seemed to go back and forth between starting and stopping some kind of process without any tangible outputs. And the key thing here is that there's very little in the way of pressure that the international community can bring to bear that would have a tangible impact on the parties. Most of the leverage that external actors can bring to bear is quite blunt instruments like sanctions or arms embargoes, which are quite serious and forceful measures, but not particularly well targeted to deliver results. And in the last several decades, we've seen that Ethiopia and particularly Eritrea, the governments are quite resilient to external pressure in this way. Eritrea was under international sanctions for about 10 years with no change in the position that it took on the key issues there. So that doesn't seem to bear much hope. I'm hoping that rather, if the external community could be bringing its pressure to bear on domestic processes, particularly within the Ethiopian context, that could try to speak to the political pressures within the Ethiopian transition, that might produce some results. But it's very difficult to see how external actors on their own are going to be able to bring much change.
Jason, thank you. Let's hope Monday's talks bring an end to this conflict. Jason Mosley is a research associate at Oxford University's African Studies Center. The World Health Organization says that COVID-19 remains a global emergency nearly 3 years after it was first declared as one. The United Nations says that while cases are falling in parts of the world, countries still need to maintain their vigilance and push to get their most vulnerable populations vaccinated. Even though the number of weekly deaths are the lowest since the pandemic began, they still remain high compared to other viruses.
While the global situation has obviously improved since the pandemic began, the virus continues to change, and there remain many risks and uncertainties. This pandemic has surprised us before and very well could again.
For the first time in nearly 3 years, because the number of deaths is less than some months ago, and because immunity of the human population has improved, members of the committee have discussed for the first time the question of termination of the public health emergency of international concern.
Efforts to vaccinate 70% of people in Africa against COVID-19 are stalling, according to the WHO. Only 3 countries out of 54 have reached the target. The WHO says that only 24% of the continent's population is fully vaccinated, compared to a global average of 64%. Chad's President Mahamat Idriss Deby has declared a state of emergency over flooding that is affecting more than 1 million people. Floods are not uncommon during the country's rainy season, which usually runs from May to October in its southern regions. But this year, the rains arrived early and were the heaviest in decades. Several southern provinces were hard hit. In the capital, Jamena, hundreds of people have fled their homes due to flooding in the last few days, and Deby says the government has established a response plan to provide shelter, food, and sanitation. Kenya's Maasai herders are struggling to keep their cattle alive as a severe drought continues in the region. Emma Gile reports.
Livestock are a way of life for Kenya's Maasai herders. Not only are they the main source of food and income, they're also markers of social status, with the herds living among people. But these cows are too weak to stand, their rib cages protruding from their sides. It's a visual reminder that Kenya is experiencing its worst drought in 40 years. The cattle are facing the consequences, and their herders are too.
Most of these cows you see here have lost all their calves due to the drought. We sometimes manage to save a few, especially when we feed them like this, but the majority of them end up dying. You can see how some of them have sores on their hides. That's because they are sometimes so weak to stand. The drought has been severe the last 5 months.
4 consecutive rainy seasons have failed to materialize, wiping out livestock and crops, and deepening a hunger crisis. At a local market, the animals are so weak from lack of food, men have to haul them to and from vehicles. Cows that used to sell for more than $500 now go for a fraction of that price.
We no longer receive buyers from afar. All these people you see here are local buyers and sellers. They just come here and place very low bids, as low as $4.
Aid groups and authorities predict the next rains in the Horn of Africa are likely to fail, too.
Emma Gile of Reuters filed that report. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll profile Cameroon's Raoul Fossi, who will tell us about his digital startup, Skyview.
The Organization of African First Ladies for Development met recently and elected a new president for their organization. This intercontinental organization seeks to leverage their unique position to advocate for policies that empowers women and youth. But questions persist. What about First Ladies who are not operating with similar visions or missions? On this week's episode of Our Voices, we will hear diverse opinions on this topic while sharing with you the voices of some African First Ladies. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
The search is on for Africa's best and brightest minds in finance, cybersecurity, technology, and anything digital, making social impact through cutting-edge technologies, innovation, and creativity in Africa. Out of 17,000 candidates from 50 countries in North, Central, East, West, and Southern Africa, only 3 will be selected from the top 10 continental finalists from Egypt, Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Cameroon. Join the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and its prestigious partners, including the Voice of America, when the 3 finalists are featured at the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit in December 2022 in Washington. Stay tuned.
In other news, nearly a dozen Somali Americans are running for legislative seats in 4 states from Maine to Washington state as the newcomers seek to join the political process in the U.S. midterm elections. The head of the U.S. Africa Command, General Michael Langley, wrapped up a 2-day visit to Morocco Thursday, where his trip focused on how Washington and Rabat can strengthen security ties while retaining regional stability. A local official says 14 people drowned when an overloaded passenger vessel capsized in northwest Nigeria. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce's U.S. Africa Business Center is convening its first annual Africa Digital Innovation Competition for African startups. VOA is working as a media partner with the Africa Business Center on this initiative. Out of 17,000 candidates in 50 countries in Africa, 10 finalists were selected. And for the next 2 weeks, we'll bring you a look at each one. Today, we profile Raoul Fossi from Cameroon, whose startup Skyview Solution designed an application that will reduce the overall cost of construction by allowing the user to monitor projects while reducing waste and time management, as well as resources.
name is Raul Fossi. I'm 37 years old, and I'm the founder of a young startup company called Skyview Solutions, based in Douala in Cameroon. We applied to the 2022 African Digital Innovation Competition because we hope that through the competition we can get the visibility necessary to attract us additional resources, both intellectual and financial, to help us develop the next phases of our application and also help us scale across Africa. To be one of the top 10 finalists of the competition is a huge honor, especially for such a young team, but it's also a big pride for our country, Cameroon. And in addition to that, it's validation of our solution and confirmation that we're headed in the right direction. Also, it's confirmation that with a little bit of courage and a lot of determination, we can accomplish great things. Our solution is a very simple application that makes it possible for anybody, private business, contractor building a home or business anywhere around the world, to access their building remotely as if they're actually there physically and be able to appreciate progress over time from a visual standpoint and a quantitative standpoint, giving them understanding of exactly what's being done on their job site over time and what resources have been used over time. The biggest impact that our solution will have on our society as a whole is that it would significantly reduce the cost of construction in our communities by 5 to 10%. It will do so by reducing the amount of waste, both in time and resources, experienced by most construction owners and construction managers currently in our environment. If we win the competition, I'll be extremely happy for my young team. In 3 years of entrepreneurship, one thing I've learned is that success is really less in the destination and more in the journey. So rather than focus on the future of what I will do, I choose to celebrate the present and the fact that we indeed have been selected amongst the top 10 companies, young companies in the continent.
Tomorrow, Egypt's Karim Amer tells us about his startup, Vice. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.